stages which are mentioned can be interpreted in terms of serenity, either serenity practice or insight. And so we'll say that one is experiencing rapture, as one starts to gain insight, knowledge, then the experience of rapture will arise.
So you can get vipassana in the process of doing the jhanas, it's saying, you know? So you could actually experience vipassana in the process of doing the jhanas, you're saying? No?
I mean, one can, but the commentary is explaining how, or the commentary is interpreting each of these stages in terms of both serenity and insight, because it's using sort of the commentarial scheme of interpretation for interpreting the sutta. But I'm sort of putting the commentary aside and saying, if one looks at what seems to be the underlying intention of the original text without using the commentarial system, then it seems to me pretty clear that it's moving within the mode of serenity meditation towards greater concentration.
Thanks.
I'm not, by saying this, I'm not invalidating the commentarial explanation, but I'm just saying that what seems to be the original intention of the text is that these stages belong to the development of concentration or serenity.
It's serenity, right?
Yeah.
I see. In other words, you're still not at insight level yet. You should not practice insight meditation.
Yeah, we'll see that the insight is coming in the fourth tetrad.
I know, after the fourth jhana, right?
Yeah. Okay, let me just take the internet question first. Okay, this is an interesting question. So the question comes up, does the experience of rapture in the second tetrad happen first, or the gladdening the mind in the third tetrad happens first, or do they happen concurrently? It's an interesting question because it seems to me that these two tetrads are actually describing the same process from two different points of view. The second tetrad, as we're going to see when we come to the next major section of the sutta, the second tetrad is subsumed under contemplation of feeling. So this is describing the process of what occurs as the mind becomes more deeply concentrated on the breath. It's describing what is occurring in that experience from the perspective of feeling, or at least with a greater emphasis on the feeling aspect. Whereas the third tetrad is describing the same process, but from the perspective of what is happening in the mind. And so I take the experience of rapture, breathing in and out, experiencing rapture, and breathing in and out, gladdening the mind, to be actually describing the same experience from the two different points of view, either focusing on the rapture itself, that is in the second tetrad, or in the third tetrad, what is happening to the mind as it's being suffused by that rapture. And so it's the same thing occurring, but it seems that because citta would be a subtler factor than, that's citta, mind, is a subtler factor than feeling. So perhaps we could say that in the third tetrad, one is able to observe more subtly what is happening within that experience of rapture. One is able to observe how the mind is suffused by the rapture. Whereas in the second tetrad, because we're still at a coarser level, the focus is upon the rapture itself rather than the way the rapture is suffusing or pervading the mind. But it's still the same process but just observed from either a coarser or a subtler point of view. At least that's the way I take it. Was there another question? Oh, I'm sorry. You had a question.
Let me spend 1 minute. If you talk into my move this button up. After you're talking, move it down. There's interference. It's on and off. One button.
Bandi, I wish to hear something more of an explanation about Vimokkayam and coming into Vimokka and Vimutti. What are the difference, how it arises differently? Vimokka and Vimutti.
The difference between Vimokka and Vimutti?
Yes.
I think that would take us a little bit sort of away from the topic that would take us away from the study of the sutta itself into a rather technical discussion of differences in the use of Buddhist terms. It's just sufficient for understanding this passage of the sutta to realize that what's being intended here by liberating the mind is not attaining at this point the ultimate liberation where the mind is released from all of the defilements permanently, but rather it's a temporary releasing or letting go first of the defilements and then of the coarser mental factors so that the mind can move into deeper stages of meditative absorption. That's sufficient for the understanding the sutta. Okay, let us move on now into the fourth tetrad, because it's at this point that we come to the development of insight. And this tetrad begins with, I shall breathe in contemplating impermanence. He trains thus, I shall breathe out contemplating impermanence. Okay, now the sort of key question, of course different teachers have different methods, but how does one make the transition, assuming the first three major sections are concerned with concentrating the mind, how does one make the transition in mindfulness of breathing from the mode of serenity or tranquility or concentration to the mode of insight? Okay, the way that I learned from my teacher in Sri Lanka is to move to the development of insight. One starts off by making a clear distinction between in-breath and out-breath. So it's not just that the distinction of in-breath and out-breath is sort of in the back of the mind as one is focusing upon the sensation of the breath, but rather one is clearly discerning the difference between in-breath and out-breath, in-breath and out-breath. Because at the time one is breathing in, the previous out-breath is gone. The in-breath comes to an end, one sees the in-breath has come to an end, then it's replaced by the out-breath, and then the out-breath comes to an end. And so one is distinguishing ending of in-breath, ending of out-breath, ending of in-breath, ending of out-breath. Okay, then after one is able to clearly distinguish over some time the difference between in-breath, out-breath, in-breath, out-breath, and the ending of in-breath, ending of out-breath, then one divides the in-breath into the three phases: initial phase, middle phase, end phase. And then the out-breath initial phase, middle phase, initial phase, middle phase, end phase. And with the in-breath, one sees the initial phase comes to an end, replaced by the middle phase. Middle phase comes to an end, replaced by the end phase. End phase of the in-breath comes to an end, replaced by the initial phase of the out-breath, then middle phase of the out-breath, end phase of the out-breath. And then one continues this for some time. And so now one is able to see the impermanence, even within one in-breath, of each phase of the in-breath. And within the out-breath, one sees the impermanence of each of the three phases within the out-breath. Okay, now when the mind becomes well focused upon this distinction, one could start focusing upon how within the in-breath, or how an in-breath is constituted, even though it appears superficially to be continuous, but there are actually a whole succession of little movements, little jerky movements within an in-breath, and a whole succession of little jerky movements without an out-breath. So one is starting to see how, well, to use an analogy, it's like if one is watching a movie, you know, it seems to be the cowboy is riding off into the sunset on his horse, and it looks like he's just moving continuously closer and closer to the horizon. But if you take the strip of the film and you look, and it's like one little frame of the film, the cowboy and the horse is here, the next frame he's there. Or even if you're watching the film, if the projector is turned into really slow motion, you start to see the individual frames. And so you see how each frame is discrete. And so now one is seeing how each in-breath is made up of a whole succession of little frames of breathing in, and how the out-breath is made up of a succession of little frames of breathing out, 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 out. And so each of these, one could see, is distinct, and each one, as the mind becomes more sort of refined in its focus, each one has an arising and a cessation. So now one is contemplating impermanence through the in-breath and out-breath, and then one learns to be able to extend that awareness to embrace all, from the breath to all five aggregates. So one could extend it, so one is, while breathing in and out, one is observing how the body itself is a succession, or it's a constant flux, a succession of physical events always arising and passing away. And how what we call the mind is also a succession of events, feelings, perceptions, volitions, consciousness arising and passing away. So now one is observing the arising and passing away of the five aggregates in connection with the in and out breathing. So this becomes contemplating impermanence while breathing in, while breathing out. Okay, now comes the second step here, which is, I shall breathe in, contemplating fading away. I shall breathe out, contemplating fading away. Now this is a rather tricky phrase. Let me just take, I'll clear these, we don't need these anymore. Okay, the second one I say it's a little bit tricky because the expression here is virag anupassi. Okay, now the suffix here, anupassi, is what's translated as contemplating, or it could be rendered observing. It's based on the root or the verb pasati, which means to see, with the prefix anu, which suggests closely. So it's closely seeing. And the first, which we just discussed, is aniccanupassi, contemplating impermanence. Now the second one, viraganupassi, the reason it's tricky is because of the word viraga. Now the word viraga, in most contexts, means the absence of raga. And what is raga? You might know about the Indian musical compositions, which are called ragas. If you've heard like Ravi Shankar or Ali Akbar Khan, you know, the musical compositions are called ragas. The word raga originally had the sense of color, especially a color obtained by dyeing cloth. And so the musical compositions are called ragas because each one is based on a scale which is supposed to convey a very specific mood which is connected to a particular season of the year, a particular time of day. So there are morning ragas, afternoon ragas, evening ragas, and it's said that in the classical period, if a really master Indian musician started to play a morning raga in the evening, the sun would reverse course, the birds would start chirping. Okay, so raga originally has the sense of a color, especially a color obtained by dyeing. And then within the spiritual philosophies of India, it takes on the meaning of passion or lust, because passion is what sort of suffuses the mind the way dye will suffuse a cloth. And so the ideal for the Indian spiritual systems, not only Buddhism, but also the yoga systems, the Vedantic systems, is viraga, which means dispassion, the overcoming of the passions, the attachments. And so within most places in the Buddha's texts where the Buddha speaks about viraga, he means dispassion or detachment, the ending of attachment. And so even sometimes nibbana is equated with viraga. You know, it's the extinction of craving, and viraga, nirod, virago tanha kayo, nirodo nibbanam. So it's the extinction of craving, dispassion, cessation, nibbana. But when a cloth is dyed and then it's washed over time, what happens is that the color fades out from the cloth. So the cloth loses its color. So another meaning of viraga is fading out, fading away. And so within some contexts, it takes on the meaning, it's a kind of extended meaning of impermanence. And so sometimes in the Ānāpānasati Sutta or in other places in the Buddhist suttas concerned with contemplation, this phrase viraganupassi could be translated contemplation of dispassion. it's not exactly correct here, but we have to recognize the way meanings of words sometimes, let's say when one word has multiple meanings, in a particular context, even though one of those meanings is intended, but the other nuances will also sort of overlap and reverberate through it. And so I think that is taking place here, though the prominent meaning of contemplating viraga is contemplating the fading away of phenomena, but sort of what is giving a particular color, a particular echo to that expression is in the background is the sense of growing dispassion, increasing dispassion. And so the way I would understand the distinction between contemplating impermanence and contemplating fading away, actually the fading away that's taking place here is not a slow and gradual fading away, but rather this is a focus upon the aspect of passing away of things. Like in contemplating impermanence, one is observing the very rapid arising and passing away, arising and passing away, or the persistence and passing away, persistence and passing away. But as the focus of the mind becomes sharper, more persistent, more precise, what happens is that the awareness of arising and persistence falls into the background, and what stands out as prominent is the passing away. So that with the in-breath, it seems that each little, what I call the jerk of the breath, is just experienced as a succession of events of vanishing, 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 vanishing. The out-breath, each little jerk of the out-breath is experienced as a succession of vanishing, 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 vanishing. And then when it's extended to all of the 5 aggregates, then one is experiencing everything within the mind-body compound as just breaking up and passing away, breaking up and passing away. So it becomes a process of continuous dissolution, dissolving, and passing away. And then that leads into the Nirodhanupassi, which is the contemplation of cessation. And the way I understand the distinction between this and contemplation of fading away is that in Nirodhanupassi, contemplating cessation, what stands out is the fact that whatever existed at the previous moment is no longer there. So that with Viragānupassi, one is seeing, for example, the body, all the physical processes in the body are just breaking up and vanishing, breaking and vanishing, breaking and vanishing. With Nirodhanupassi, one is cognizant or aware that bodily process is gone, that process is gone, that one is gone, that one is gone. That has ceased, that has ceased, this has ceased, this has ceased. So everything is constantly ceasing and gone, gone, gone. So this gives that really distinctive sense that nothing has any stability, any persistence, but everything is just breaking up and vanishing and gone, disappeared. And then that leads into the 4th stage of contemplation, which is contemplation of relinquishment. And this can be understood as simply relinquishing, because one is seeing that everything within the 5 aggregates is constantly just breaking up and passing away. There comes the relinquishing of any grasping or clinging to anything within the 5 aggregates. And so whatever arises in the mind, one just lets it go, lets it go, lets it go. Whatever is experienced within form, feeling, perception, mental activities, consciousness, because one is observing it's breaking up and passing away, one is just lets it go, lets it go, lets it go. And so this is contemplation of relinquishment. And so these are the 4 tetrads concerned with insight. And so then the Buddha sort of sums up and says, this is how mindfulness of breathing is developed and cultivated so that it is of great fruit and great benefit. There was a marvelous book. I don't know whether we have it in the library, but we should get it. It was written by the meditation master of Mittarigala, hermitage in Sri Lanka, Venerable Matara Sri Jnanarama. It was called, I think it's called The 7 Contemplations of Insight. He takes the scheme of not simply these 4, but it gets expanded in some later works into 7 contemplations. And then he gives very detailed explanations of these 7 contemplations, both based on the text and also from the standpoint of personal experience. I'll have to check with Kairi to see if we have it and ask her to order it if we don't have a copy. Okay, then we could ask whether there's any questions. Please, take the microphone that's being passed.
Thank you. Thank you, Bhante.
Yeah.
Is this phase of the breaking up, the fading out, the vanishing, is that commensurate with the quality of Bhanga?
Yeah.
That is Bhanga.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. That's what in the Visuddhimagga, I'm not sure whether this already comes in the Patisambhida Magga, but this is sort of what comes to be called Bhanga Jnana. It's the knowledge of dissolution. And it's described very beautifully, very graphically in the Visuddhimagga with a number of similes, like I think it uses a simile of like a line of pots set out on a shelf, and then somebody takes a rod and sort of smashes all of them so that one pot hits the other, which breaks, which hits the next one, which breaks, which hits the next one, which breaks. Take the mobile microphone.
Bhante, this is not related directly to the mindfulness of breathing, but a general question. Earlier you had the word vimukti and vimoksha. Yeah. In Hinduism also I believe there's moksha.
Yeah.
Is this the same, or because sometimes vimukti, some people try to say that it's the same as nibbana, moksha I mean. So could it be, I mean, can it be sort of mixed up? Because we always use the word nibbana, never moksha. But in Hinduism they say moksha.
Occasionally the Buddhist texts do use the word, of course in Pali it comes out mokkha, which is the same word as in Sanskrit moksha. Okay, in the Hindu traditions, the word moksha is used most often to describe the ultimate goal. So it means release, deliverance, liberation. In early Buddhism, the word which is used more often is vimutti, which comes from the same root. And so etymologically, they're pretty much the same, though conceptually they're different because Buddhism and Hinduism are working with different philosophical foundations. So they both have the sense of the ultimate liberation from samsara, but it's just that Hinduism has a dozen different schools, but they'll conceive liberation according to the particular tenets of the different Hindu schools, whereas in Buddhism, liberation is conceived in accordance with the Buddhist philosophical foundations.
And Buddhism we have Ānāpānasati, which is...
Yeah, that would sort of be the key difference, that in the different Hindu schools, there's some idea of the Atman, the self, as the agent of liberation, or that which undergoes liberation. Whereas in Buddhism, liberation comes through the insight into non-self. Victor.
Thanks. I was wondering, here we talk about insights into the 5 aggregates.
Yeah.
And is it possible, or have you read anywhere of like any disciple of the Buddha or any other practitioner having these insights just without going through these stages, like just having, like maybe they were just walking and all of a sudden they just had this insight after maybe reading the Dhamma so many times that it just suddenly clicked in their head, like some kind of epiphany, or do you have to go through?
Yeah, this is an interesting question. Because one does see quite often in the text that, particularly in situations where somebody is coming to the Buddha, often for the first time, where the Buddha is giving it discourse to a large audience, but there's somebody in the audience who is, their faculty is ripe for awakening. And so it says that as the Buddha was speaking for such and such a person, his mind became calm, settled, clear, free from the hindrances. And then as the Buddha spoke, the Buddha then turned the topic of the discourse to the Four Noble Truths. Then it said that as, say, Siha the general sat there arose in his mind the dust-free, stainless vision of the Dhamma.
Right.
Whatever is subject to arising is subject to cessation. And then he penetrates the truth of the Dhamma, and then he comes out as a stream enterer. And so one sees, passages like that, and the text never described what is taking place in his mind at a micro level, but it seems hard to believe that he's going through each of these insights. What seems to me to be the case, that this would happen with somebody who has practiced in previous lives, and so the faculties would be quite mature.
Right.
It's like a fruit which is very ripe, just ready to drop from the tree, and then as soon as a wind blows, even a gentle breeze, it drops from the tree.
Right.
But if it weren't gradually maturing as it was hanging in the tree, then even if a powerful wind were to blow, it wouldn't drop from the tree.
Right. And also, there are other insights that we can have, like insights into the Four Noble Truths, for example. That's some people
usually
take forever.
What's the realist, let's say, the penetration of the Four Noble Truths, according to the classical model, will come through the sequential insights into impermanence. Usually it's expressed as impermanence, dukkha, or unsatisfactoriness, and non-self. But there are, as I said, numbers of cases of disciples who just pick up sometimes a phrase of Dharma, And somehow
It just clicks.
it just clicks.
Yeah.
It seems that they don't undergo deliberate training in samadhi and vipassana.
Right.
But I would imagine that, again, that they've sort of built up those qualities through previous lives, and then suddenly it's all coming together.
Right. Is it possible to train in formal meditation for many hours, and then when you arise out of meditation and you're just in the normal state, maybe it just clicks?
Oh, that happens quite often.
You get like it's like an epiphany, right? Like you just,
there are many cases like that.
right. So it's like it may not happen while you're on the cushion, but it could happen when you get out, and then all of a sudden it just clicks.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Like there are cases where, I think of one example, it was the nun, I think Patachara. She was already a sotapanna, already a stream enterer. And then she had been meditating very earnestly, diligently, in order to reach the final stage arhatship, but she couldn't attain it. Was it Patachara? Yeah, so then she just, I think she must have been meditating outside her hut. So then she decided to give up and go back into her hut and take a rest. And she had a little lamp with her. And then as she was, settled on the bed, about to go to sleep, she blew out the lamp. And just when she blew out the lamp, when the flame went out, boom. Then the realization.
She got it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Bhante.
But don't think that, okay, I don't have to meditate, just take a lamp with me and blow it out. I mean, when I was living in Sri Lanka for many years, we didn't have electricity, and I blew out the kerosene lamp for 15 years every night. And I'm still a foolish, unenlightened.
Yeah, we just say that the first, jhana will be related to this is suffering, and the second will be origin of suffering, and the third will be cessation of suffering. Related to, like, say, the jhanas and the Four Noble Truths. Would they be related in any way? Because it seems like, I mean, what I think is that the first one, it seems more like this is suffering. In other words, it's like understanding it. And then it brings it into more like the origin, the second jhana. And the third jhana will be the cessation of suffering.
No.
No, it will be, because it seems like a relation there, because it's four, but it seems like everything is fading away. The way leading to the cessation of suffering seems the fourth jhana, which is actually insight.
The four jhanas or jnanas?
Jhanas, I'm sorry, jhanas.
Jnana. You mean that are mentioned here in this sutta?
No, it's not mentioned here, of course. It's just something that I've just seen to be more like related, because the Buddha brings everything in relation to the four noble truths. And it's, I don't know if it has to do anything with this.
Yeah.
Or is related.
It's something that I've never thought about it, and it doesn't seem to quite work out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
But I'll have to look into it, but I just never thought along those lines. I think we'll have to stop now to end this session, and then we can come back. We'll come back at 12:30 and then have some discussion. And now, the last two classes we've been discussing mindfulness of breathing, and now next weekend there's going to be at least a short weekend retreat on mindfulness of breathing. So you could put it into practice instead of just hearing about it. So I'm not going to have the class next week, and then the week after I won't be around. I have to go to New Hampshire. So we'll have the next class on August, I think it's the 16th. Next week, next Saturday is August 2nd. Then August 9th, I'm gone. And 9 plus 7 is 16? Okay, so the next class will be August 16th. And then we will hopefully go through the rest of the sutta in that class. And I want to encourage all of you to register for the retreat if you're able to over that weekend. Probably if you go up to the office, you can register, or else go online and register online. And then, really, they can go and register in person. Oh, I see, I see. I'm pretty sure that if their space is open, that you can register. Probably they set a deadline in order to encourage people to register early. But if there are open, if there are vacancies, you can register. Okay, so let us share the merits. Okay, so we share the merits with the devas, the Buddhas, the deities, the fierce spirits, the dragon spirits, and with all beings, and wishing that they might be well and happy, protect the Buddha Dharma, and then protect ourselves, others, and the world. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu sasanang akasa